All right, are you ready?
Always ready.
Let me just double check again that it's going. Sweet. All right. Ready?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Wednesday Word Wad. I am Zach, and I am here with Mike, and we are going to be going over in-season training, so specifically resistance training, strength training for athletes.
I'm excited.
Yes. So a common, I guess, idea is that we need to adjust training during season or completely cut it out. Right.
Yep.
That's a very common theme that we see, especially with the youth. I would say a couple talks ago we were talking about what to do for resistance training for like under the age of 5, in between 5 and 10 years old, 10 to 15. So a very common theme for kind of the under the 18-year-old age group is to either limit resistance training or weightlifting when they're in season, or completely cut it out. Mm-hmm. Mike, what is your initial kind of thought behind that? Do you agree or disagree?
So it's a complex question, and I think you could defend either argument either way. Mm-hmm. Of course, the argument to completely omit would be a very challenging one and very circumstantial to support. The only time I would probably completely omit training is if the athlete is playing the sport every single day for hours on end, and it's a very aggressive, overall systemically fatiguing sport, like they're wrestling bears in the woods. In most cases, no. I like the approach of analyzing the sport under the context of how we analyze SRA curves. So SRA curve just stands for stimulus, recovery, adaptation. So the aim would be to kind of treat the competition as if it's another workout. Meaning you don't want to train in a way that fatigues you going into the sport or into the competition. But as we know, each system, each muscle in the body recovers, and if you do it in a timely fashion, people are able to be at peak fitness going into whatever athletic endeavors they may have for the week. So the way this might look contextually for like a football player, for example, is if they have a football game on a Friday night, you probably aren't going to be doing the same hard leg training that you may have been doing on your Thursday leg day. Let's say you train legs on Thursday. But if it takes you about 72 hours to recover from legs, then I think it would make sense to probably hit legs on Monday or Tuesday. And then the way that you would kind of shape the periodization for in-season would also be rather specific as well. The goal of strength training in season, I think Zach and I would both agree, is to decrease risk of injury and keep your strength, force, and power production for the sport at hand. So you probably won't be doing a ton of volume meaning lots of working sets. You probably won't be doing rep ranges that create a lot of delayed onset muscle soreness. You may not do as much eccentric work, think Nordic hamstring curls or RDLs, because those take longer to recover from. But what you'll still do is probably sets of 5 to 10 reps, depending on the exercise on most movements, where number of working sets is a bit lower. And then dosing in a way, of course, where you feel fully recovered going into your competition. You want to stay strong. You want to keep that tissue at a capacity where it can handle the sport itself. But of course, you don't want to do things that diminish productivity within sports.
I agree. So would you kind of went over it a little bit, would you say that the main purpose of in-season lifting is to build strength, maintain, or a combination of the two? Is it possible to build strength in season? Is it not possible? I know you mentioned depending on the sport that you are playing, might be a little bit more high fatiguing than other sports. Like if you are a baseball player, you're not going to be as much systemic fatigue as a wrestler or a football player. Those other two sports are a little bit more demanding on the body. Now, there might be more localized fatigue, like if you play baseball and you just got done pitching, and say you threw like 90 pitches in six, 7, 8 innings. Bicep curls might not be your go-to the day before.
No.
Or even a substantial amount of shoulder volume.
Correct.
So, what would you say the main goal is in the in-season lifting?
Yeah, so I think it depends. If it's an athlete that plays like 3 different sports throughout the year, they're always in season. So if you take the approach of like not training in season, well, I guess you're never training.
Yes.
You're never going to work the systems that actually get you better. So that's a very common mistake that I oftentimes see in the burbs, especially amongst high schoolers. It depends on how you do compared to others within your sport as well, right? If you're not starting in your sport, you're not getting a lot of playing time, you could be doing things to put yourself in a position where you're stronger, you're faster. I would put more of my resources and my energy into that than making sure that I'm fully ready to go, even though I'm going to sit on the sidelines on whatever your sporting day is. Mm-hmm. So if you're an athlete that's young, that really wants to get better and wants to go from like intermediate or not as great your sport compared to your peers to the advanced, I would put more of your resources into potentiating growth in the season, and then think about it as a long-term project. Maybe you don't start this year, but if you train hard in season while all the starters are not training as hard in season, that's going to give you a leg up the following season.
Yes.
Anecdotally speaking, my sophomore year when I was in high school, on the football team, freshman year I didn't start even on the freshman team. Sophomore year, by week 4, I was starting on varsity over the 2 senior captains that were both middle linebacker. I was able to get their job because I was training in season. I saw that they were probably 5 to 10% better than me at the beginning of training camp. And I said, well, if I just do enough work to get a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, put a little bit more energy into that, then I think I'll have a good shot to kind of go somewhere with this. And I increased my bench in about 2 months from 225 to 275. I increased my squat from 315 to 405. And we weren't running 40 times or split times, but I did get a lot faster as well. I was doing a little bit extra sprint training. Now, the frequency of training during that time wasn't that grand. The first couple weeks I was playing JV, so I think I actually trained before the JV games or that morning because I really didn't care. I was thinking long term, what do I got to do to get 11% better so that I can get a starting spot in varsity? If you're a top level athlete and you're like the best person at your high school, you already got all your D1 offers, then maybe you go under the scope of maintenance within season. Now, in order to maintain your strength, maintain your muscle, it actually doesn't take that much training volume. You can train pretty far away from failure on most of your sets.
And only a couple sets.
Yeah, only a couple sets that you could probably do. There's some literature that seems to suggest around 20 to 30% of your minimal effective volume to just maintain. So the amount of time that takes, the amount of energy that takes to create that profound effect to stay where you're at, probably worth it because you don't want to get out of season, go to your Division I school, and all of a sudden you regressed. Mm-hmm. So the goal would be to at least maintain and then not do too much damage on the tissue, generate too much fatigue, so that your risk of injury doesn't go up.
To kind of piggyback off of with that last point of not doing too much to increase your chance of injury, I think there needs to be, it kind of pointed out that there's a difference between like exercise is like a pre-planned and intent behind it versus like physical activity or like daily living. The goal of exercise, especially in season, should not be to tire you out. It doesn't mean you had a good workout or a good training session. There needs to be a focus to it, and that's where we kind of really nail down the point of the volume tends to be 20 to 30% lower, like you said.
You could even go lower. So 20 to 30% of like your minimal effective volume.
Minimal effective dose. So,
yeah.
So then the main, to reiterate, the main focus is to maintain your strength or reduce your risk of injury. It shouldn't be to tire you out because you need to be recovered for either your game later on that day or the next day. Because if you look at the pros, there are some pros that go into the stadium, onto the field beforehand, and they're doing some sort of, now given on social media some of the exercise choices and the types of workouts that these people are doing, aren't the brightest. They usually involve some sort of stability ball aspect, and
Shout out Seaman.
yeah, exactly. So the main goal is to reduce your fatigue, reduce the risk of injury, and when fatigue is too high, then that injury risk goes up.
Correct. And guess what? If you were training really hard in the off season, you're probably gonna have a pretty high tissue capacity. So if you go down to that 20 to 30% mark, you're going to recover really fast for that because of all the work that you've done previously. And I'll just give you some numbers here just to make that make a little bit more sense. Let's say if you want to get your pushing strength, upper body pushing strength up by, I don't know, it takes 12 sets per week to do so. That's your minimal effective dose. Well, guess what? 20 to 30%, you're only doing, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 sets with some type of intent per week.
Yeah.
If your games are on like Fridays and you do that on Monday and it's like 3 sets of pressing, I think you'll be okay. But the cool thing is that it's going to be enough based on what you're doing previously to probably keep what you had built.
Yeah.
One thing that we will note is, let's say like you're an athlete that's in a sport that requires a lot of jumping, like basketball, for example. The training may change a little bit in season because you're doing so much jumping within the sport. You probably wouldn't really benefit from doing maybe any jumping outside of the sport.
That should be the last thing you're doing.
That should be the last thing. So think about the variations of which you're doing for movement selection as well as skill acquisition. Think about the skills that you are utilizing within the sport and make sure that there's not too much overlap on a weekly basis.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that covers it.
I think so.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Zach.
Sweet. Sweet. One down. You want to do another one?
Sure.